He would give me money to pay the bills, and I wouldn't pay the bills. He checked the bank account one day. He was at work, and he come home, and he said, I want to know the truth, and I want to know the whole truth. And I broke down, and I told him, I said, I've been buying prescription pain medication off the street.
Let's be honest about recovery.
The rewards, the challenges.
Let's talk about our failures. We are flawed people, after all.
Let's challenge the stigmas that weigh us down.
Because while most of us are looked at, few of us are seen.
Let's talk about addiction.
And how Christ overcomes our weaknesses.
Because we are loved.
Because we are loved.
Because we are loved.
We are loved.
We are because loved. We are loved.
Hello, my name is Paula, and this is my story. After a 15-year addiction to drugs and self-destruction, God delivered me and set me free on January the 17th of 2020 at the Home of Grace for Women in 8 Mile, Alabama. And today, my life is nothing like I would have ever imagined it could be.
Hey there, and welcome back to the Jesus Loves Addicts podcast. I'm Kathryn, and this is Paul. Today, we're going to be speaking with Paula Driver. Paula is from Citronelle, Alabama. She recently celebrated 5 years clean and sober. She is a wife and a mother of 3. And today, she's going to tell us her story of all she overcame to become who she is today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Amen. All right. So, I don't know if you've watched any of our other episodes. I think you said you had. So, we're going to start at the beginning and kind of let you tell us what brought you here. Okay.
I grew up in a very loving home. My parents are still married today. They will celebrate 55 years in July. I'm the baby and the only girl of 4 brothers.
Oh, wow. Well protected.
So, growing up, I maybe a tad spoiled, but had a great life. My oldest brother, who is very much still in active addiction to this day at 54, introduced me to pot at the age of 13 and tried it at the age of 16. I had tried cocaine for the first time. At the age of 18, I had tried pills for the first time, and that's kind of where life took a turn.
Pills being opiates?
Yes, I was highly addicted to prescription pain medication. At 19, I had my first son. Had no clue about being a mother, a wife, or anything like that.
Were you were in a relationship?
Yes.
Okay.
I was in a relationship. The father of my children is 10 years older than me, so he was 29 when I met him.
Okay. Were your parents fine with that?
Yes.
Okay.
They were. They loved David and, thought the world of him and, so things were good. And at the age of, I'd probably say 27 is when I'd hurt my neck and started going to pain management and was getting prescribed 60 Lortab-10s a month. And that was the beginning of the end for me. And my addiction continued on from there. And
did your husband? Well, I'm saying husband. Was it the father? It was he became your husband.
Yes.
Was he also using?
No, he was not. He was not.
Tell us about that dynamic. So you meet him around age 18?
18.
Okay.
Young, had no clue. Thought that I wanted to be married and have children, and that was what I was supposed to do in life, was get married and have children and live the white picket fence life, and it was far from that on the inside.
Yeah. What about your other 2 brothers? Was it just you and the older brother that were...
Actually, 3 of my mother's 5 children are addicts.
Okay.
My oldest brother is 54. He is, like I said, still in full-blown addiction. My middle brother, David, has never done any drugs, never hardly drank. My middle brother that I lost in January of 2022 had just celebrated 4 years whenever he passed.
So he died in recovery.
Yeah, he was in recovery. He actually had a massive heart attack and passed. And then there was me. Well, my brother Timbo, and he was the golden child, as I like to call him. Never drank, never done drugs, and then here I come along, and was not the daughter that I'm sure my mother and daddy had prayed that I would be.
That they would get.
Definitely not a girly girl at all. Full-blown tomboy. I thought I could do whatever my brothers could do.
Well, they probably let you think that.
And they did. They did. They let me think that. And, when I got mixed up with my oldest, it's sad to say, but my oldest brother and I don't even know a relationship without drugs being involved with it whatsoever. Like, I've been clean. I celebrated 5 years on the 17th of January, and I haven't been around him in 5 years that I've been sober. Like, even when our brother passed away, he didn't show up, didn't come to the funeral, anything like that. So,
Well, so, you said that you weren't the daughter, maybe. I mean, this might be humor, but I just want to check it out. You said it probably wasn't the daughter they expected. Do you feel like, was there some self-consciousness? Do you feel like a disappointment to them? Do you really feel that way? Or were you just kind of being...
For a long time, I felt like a disappointment. Absolutely, I did. I felt like that
In your younger years or only after your addiction started?
I left home at 17 and wanted to do what I wanted to do, quit school, because I had better things to do with my time. Got into my first abusive relationship at 17. The guy actually tried to kill me. Lived through that. And then
this was after you left home. So you got into that relationship. This wasn't your husband.
Did he have anything to do with you leaving home? Like, did you leave home with his romantic notion of, here I come?
Yes. And
Run
my
off into the
parents
sunset.
hated him. And my mom kept telling me it's not going to end well. And of course, at that age, my mom didn't know anything.
Yeah. Don't you hate it when our parents are right?
And she has been right so many times in the last 43 years of my life.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Now, was he using?
No.
He wasn't. So just broken in different ways.
Just broken in different ways.
Did your family know about the abuse?
Yes, I actually went home after that happened.
Okay.
And then got married the first time 2 days after my 18th birthday. Didn't stay married but 3 months. Called my dad to come get me. I did not want to be married. And then a month later, I met David, who would become the father of my children. And
sorry. There's an interesting twist. What
is
the story behind this 3-month marriage? What was this gentleman like?
A pushover.
Okay. So isn't that interesting? So you come out of this very abusive, probably anything but a pushover, stubborn, my way is my way, and go all the way to the other end of the spectrum.
And got bored real quick.
Real quick. Real
3
quick.
months. Yeah.
It didn't take me long.
And your daddy came to get you when you called.
Absolutely.
How did they feel about him?
They liked him okay, I guess. And then, we got divorced, and that was that. And then...
Now, was he also a non-user?
Non-user.
So interesting, because you said you started around age 13.
With my brother.
So through these guys who are not using, are you still using, or do you temporarily stop?
I wouldn't use, there would be breaks where I wouldn't use anything. I would live my life,
Didn't have the hooks in you yet.
I was going to say, you didn't have the mental obsession of addiction.
Not the mental obsession. And when I met David, I was like, okay, this is it. I got pregnant, and, we're going to live this great and wonderful life, and we're going to raise these boys. He had 2 from a first marriage, and then we wound up having 3 together. And then when I got hurt, my life...
How was it before then?
It was great.
Did you use it all, anything during that time?
I did not.
Alcohol, nothing. Okay, so how many years are you clean now?
I'd probably say from the time I was 19 till I was 27.
Wow.
And at 32, I turned it on. I left. My kids were 12, 11, and 6, and I decided I didn't want to be a wife. I didn't want to be a mother. I didn't want to do anything but what I wanted to do.
So that ramps up quickly. So that happened at 32. So at 27, you have this accident, you get prescribed medications. I'm assuming at some point you start supplementing what the doctor's giving you with street, or are you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was buying them off the street. Whatever
How
I
quickly
could
did
do.
that
I was
happen?
fixing, yeah.
I realized probably within about 3 or 4 months that it was headed in the wrong direction. But
So you said
I
you
didn't
actually
care.
tried painkillers the first time at 18, and you really liked them then.
I liked them then. But I knew, like in the back of my mind, something was telling me you can't.
You like
do
them too
this.
much.
You like them too much. You like the way it makes you feel. You can get all this done, and you don't have to worry about anything. I'm not hurt.
Yeah.
I felt good, but in the back of my mind, from watching my oldest brother,
Like, this is bad.
I said, this is bad, and this is really bad. And then when I left, I was 32, and the kids, like I said, were 12, 11, and 6. And I tried crystal meth for the first time at 32 years old.
Well, Paula, let me slow you down because I feel like we're missing a lot of that
Okay.
transition
7.
because. And I appreciate where you're telling us because that is you clearly get to a very dark spot quickly. But that's I can imagine somebody hearing. I don't have to imagine. I'm hearing, and I have this question: How does a mom go from within 5 years this place of using to I'm going to step away from this family, right? Because that's. I mean, I know the clinical answer, but I mean, from an emotional standpoint, can you take us through that journey of getting?
What did the 5 years look like?
I was a very depressed individual. I believe a lot of it was postpartum. I just didn't recognize that it was postpartum.
So did the depression precede that accident in 27? At
No.
27?
I was actually working and hurt my neck working. And
But I mean, were you depressed prior to that, or did that all start after age 27 as well?
I was depressed, but I just
Worked through it?
I worked through it, I guess, so to speak. And then David and I we started having some problems when I turned 30. Things were just kind of rocky.
Did any of that have to do with you buying pills off the street? How did that how did he know at this point that he has to know you're buying, where's the money going?
He would give me money to pay the bills, and I wouldn't pay the bills.
Yeah, that would lend itself to a rocky relationship.
And when
A little bit.
he checked the bank account one day, he was at work, and he come home, and he said, I want to know the truth, and I want to know the whole truth. And I broke down, and I told him, I said, I've been buying prescription pain medication off the street.
Had you moved on from Lortabs?
It stayed Lortabs. Other than I tried the Meth, but mine was always the Lortabs. Lortabs and Percocets. Those were the two things.
So did the doctor prescriptions run out? Were you beyond where they were writing, or were you supplementing continued doctor prescriptions as well?
Did you still
do you
have a
understand
doctor?
what I'm saying?
I still had a doctor, but I was still buying them off the street.
So you were getting them from the doctor and from the street.
Yes.
So you were just supplementing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So one of the thoughts I had was, how are you hiding this from your husband? But in some ways you don't need to, because you're getting prescribed, and he thinks
Right.
everything he's seeing is from the prescription medication.
Right.
Okay.
Did he ever challenge it before the bank account, ever say are you taking too many, anything?
David was an enabler. He became one of the biggest enablers that I had. He wound up having his first heart attack, and he started getting prescribed pain medication.
Is this before you left at 32?
Nope, that was right around the time.
Right around the time you left.
Right around the time.
So he has a heart attack.
So he would have only been, you said he's, 10 years older than you? Mm-hmm. So he was only 42 and had his first heart attack. Oh, that's scary.
How just out of curiosity, how bad was the financial loss? Should there have been $50,000 in the bank and there was $2,000, or was it
I had almost $1,000 a week habit.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
on
it was
top of what you're getting from the doctors.
On top of what I'm getting from the doctors.
Yeah. Okay. So that will do some damage.
Yeah. Quickly.
Yeah.
Quickly. And, I can't be trusted with cash. I can't. He can't. And it wound up coming out during that time because, like I said, he would give me the money to pay the bills, and I wouldn't pay the bills. And the power company's showing up at the house, and he's looking at me
Like,
why are they here? And I'm like,
what would you tell him? I mean, you couldn't come out at that point because you got to protect your using.
I would call my daddy.
Yeah, okay.
Another enabler.
That was your other greatest.
But my hero at the same time.
Yeah.
Well,
Come fix it.
Come fix it. And he would. And he would. He would come fix it.
A hero in intention only, right?
Right.
So those people have great intentions, but they're really being heroic, unfortunately, for the disease, not for you.
Right.
They don't know.
They don't know that, but
Right.
Wow.
And when your dad would rescue you, I'm guessing that was y'all's secret. He was never going to tell David because he was also helping you in that.
Nobody knew.
Yeah.
So how old are you when he confronts you? I want to know the truth, this conversation. When does that happen?
I was probably around 30.
So there's still 2 years left before you leave. So what do those next 2 years look like? I mean, the cat's out of
Pure
the
hell.
That's when y'all started
That's
having lots
when
of problems.
We really started having lots of problems. Lots of problems.
Did that come with him confronting everything or now
And I
challenging
didn't
you?
want to. Anytime anybody would confront me, it would make me so furious.
Sure.
They would be like, "What are you on?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm not on anything."
How dare you accuse me?
Right. Like, if you're going to accuse me of this,
I
then
might
I
as
might
well.
as well go ahead and
Yeah.
do it anyway.
Oh, is that mindset?
Of course, you're already doing it.
Yeah.
I was already doing
Yeah,
it.
but we can't get honest and tell them.
Right.
No.
I
But
would
that
have.
fury keeps everybody at arm's length.
Absolutely.
Well, it also
Absolutely.
makes them start doubting. They're like, God, did I just accuse them?
Yeah.
And then they're apologizing, and then they got to make it right. Yeah.
I was, and I shared this with somebody not too long ago. Drug addiction just kind of went along with the lifestyle. I was addicted to lots of things. I was addicted to men, to money, to sex, to having my own way, to being in control. I was very, very selfish, very self-centered. I didn't care. Hurt people, and I left a path of destruction
Wherever you went.
everywhere I went.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that because that is so true, right? It's we often talk about one of the addictions, but there are a whole host of them
Several.
that typically follow us in our wake.
And I want to piggyback that, like you listed all of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of a lot of issues when I see people go back. It's they deal with the obvious, and you've mentioned that multiple times. It's like you deal with the drug and alcohol. That's just that's the one that's costing you consequences that are able to be seen. But if you leave all the other stuff undone, it's just going to come right back in another form because you haven't dealt with anything.
Right.
And all of that other stuff adds to the shame, right? I mean, it's feeding and reinforcing that shame.
Yes. Yeah. And the shame and guilt and regret was almost unbearable before I went and got into recovery at the Home of Grace in 8 Mile. I mean, I would look at myself in the mirror and it would just disgust me. I mean, here I am with these wonderful parents who didn't deserve anything that I was doing to them. My children suffered. Oh my gosh. It has still taken some time for God. I mean, there's relationships that are still being mended with that through my children. I mean, they don't trust me.
Yeah.
They don't trust me, and it's been 5 years, and they still don't trust me.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get it. I gave them every reason in the world, and, it's one thing for you to have your dad walk out on you in your life, but for the person who gave birth to you to say, I don't want to be your mother anymore.
Did you, because you've said two versions of that, right? You've talked about leaving because you didn't want to be a wife or mother anymore, and now you just mentioned that again. Were those words ever actually said? I mean, did you actually say that to anybody? I don't want to be your mother anymore. I don't want to be a mother anymore.
Or you just walked away?
I just walked away.
Just walked away, but internally.
I just walked away.
So yeah, we're at 30. So what happened between 30 and 32?
It was like
just downhill.
It was just downhill, and then I
wrote on you.
Was going to the store one day and never came back.
So you left David at the house with the 3 boys?
And I left.
Wow.
Where did you go?
I was staying from house to house wherever I could crash.
So your network was already set up. You'd been using that for a while. You just disappeared into that network.
I'd like to take a moment to recognize a major podcast sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by America's Thrift Stores, your go-to option for decluttering and giving back. If you have a closet bursting at the seams or a garage that's seen better days, we've got the perfect solution for you.
That's right. America's Thrift Stores makes it easy to clear out the clutter and make a positive impact in your community. Whether you're cleaning out your wardrobe, downsizing your living space, or just looking to give back, America's Thrift Stores has you covered.
And here's the best part. You've got options. Schedule a hassle-free home pickup, drop off your items at one of their convenient donation sites, or swing by an America's Thrift Store to donate in person. No matter which way you choose, you're making a difference.
Absolutely. Every donation you make to America's Thrift Stores directly benefits charities in your area, such as the Home of Grace and other fantastic organizations dedicated to helping those in need.
For example, donations made to America's Thrift Stores in southern Mississippi help the Home of Grace provide support and assistance to individuals facing drug and alcohol addiction. Your contributions make a real impact on their mission to provide freedom from addiction through Christ-centered recovery. So not only are you decluttering your life, but you're also helping build a stronger and more supportive community.
It's truly a double blessing. So what are you waiting for? Clean out that closet, clear out that garage, and make a positive difference in your community by donating to America's Thrift Stores.
Visit America's Thrift Stores online to schedule a home pickup, locate a donation site near you, or get directions to one of their store locations.
America's Thrift Stores, where giving back never goes out of style.
Let me go back for a second. Were you a rebellious child? Because it's interesting because you leave home at 17, but the way you describe home is loving and caring, and so something isn't mixing well, right? So
I was rebellious as a teenager, probably starting at 14, 15 years old. I was rebelling, anything my parents, and by this time, I had already smoked weed with my brother, and he was doing every drug known to man.
Were they preoccupied with him? And you're the last one out of 5.
And in a lot of ways, he always came in, and whenever he was around, everything was all about him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, everybody else was just kind of there.
Well, the squeaky wheel gets the grease,
right?
Yeah. So from up until age 13, because you mentioned Dad being kind of another enabler, were you Daddy's girl? Like,
Absolutely.
Were you just the sweet little, and then 13, enter the rebel, right? Is that kind of...
And she did not stop until she wound up going into rehab.
So were there some dust-ups with Dad, the enabler, did you guys butt heads, or was he still just always...
Just always.
Always, hey, babe. I wonder now, I know I'm getting a little bit off the beaten path. Your second husband, who was the pushover, do you see any similarities maybe between him and your dad?
Kind of, but not really, no.
Just kind of in a well-intentioned kind of... Because it's just... Okay. So just interesting. All right. So also interesting, because I think sometimes we like to blame the rebellion on the drugs and alcohol, which, yes, you started smoking pot at 13, but really that's just a flesh problem.
You just didn't like being told what to do.
Yeah. Oh, a problem with authority?
Yeah, it's a people problem.
I hated authority.
Well, you didn't have a problem with it until they told you no.
Right. Yeah, just don't tell me no. And we were fine. I didn't want to be told no. And
I think a part of that also just comes down to, it's not like you've had any consequences not real ones. So there's no ability as a teenager to say, if I leave home at 17, this is what could stand to happen.
Yeah.
Everything's always going to be fine because nothing had ever not worked out.
Right. I always had a safe place to fall.
Even when you left at 17 and you got into the abusive relationship, when you decided, I'm not doing this, you had a choice.
Right.
So at all those times you had a choice, and then you had a choice to not, hey, I like these pain pills. I have a choice. I'm not going to use them. Okay. Well, then you get hurt. You no longer had a choice. And that's where you really started having consequences.
Well, rebellion and addiction share a common trait, and that is they're both very short-sighted, right? So mom and dad are saying, hey, we don't like this boy that you're dating. It's saying, well, I'm going to show you true love is going to win out.
I love him so
much.
He's the best thing to ever come into my life.
Yes. And then drugs and alcohol were the best thing to ever come into your life until they're not.
Until they're not.
They're both very short-sighted. So, okay, thank you. Yeah, because that kind of cleared things up for me. So there's just the people problem in you, right? As people, we tend to be rebellious. That's just the sin nature. Okay, so now we jump back ahead.
You've left, and you're staying here to there.
Here to there.
I wanted to ask about contact with your parents when you left at 32. Talk to your dad. Did they know where you were?
I didn't talk to anybody. I had got hooked up with somebody that I had known from high school.
Part of the relationship addiction.
Yes, very much so. And he had actually been in prison for cooking crystal meth and had not been out of prison long. He and I get together. I tried meth for the first time.
Did you have an unhealthy attraction to bad boys?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
The rebel.
The badder, the better.
Yeah.
And
in your mind.
And in my mind, I could fix them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I could fix them. I was going to make them a better person. And when I tried meth for the first time, that only lasted for me about 6 months. I didn't like it. It didn't give me. I wanted that feeling I got from taking Lortabs every day, and meth did not do that. So that was very short lived. In February of 2015, I think, I totaled my car out. I actually speedballed out and totaled my car out in Hurley, Mississippi. Don't even know how I got there. And I had numerous drugs in my system. Had been up at this point for probably about 6 days. Had taken some Xanax bars, had taken some Lortabs, taken some Somas, and the guy that introduced me to meth. He and I had gotten into a really, really bad fight that morning, and I left. And I was actually on the phone with my mother when I wrecked my car and told her I was in Saraland because that's the last recognition I have of where I was going.
Where you thought you were.
And the next thing I know, I wake up in Singing River Hospital, and David, the father of my kids, is standing at the foot of my bed.
He's still your husband.
He's still my husband. And
how long had it been since you'd actually seen him?
It had probably been 8 months or so since I'd seen him. And I come to, and he's standing at the foot of my bed, and I'm like, I said, what are you doing here? And he said, do you not know what happened? I said, where's my car? What did you do with my car? I said, I've got to go. Like, why am I in the hospital? So he starts trying to explain to me what has happened. And I'm like, you're lying. I was like, y'all are lying to me. Where is my car so I can leave? And he's like, Paula, you totaled your car out. Like, we're going to go by there and get your stuff out of it when we leave here. And I'm like, you're lying. And we pull up to the junkyard, and there's my car. And I'm like, man. God, that was my warning. That was my first warning about where my life was headed, and I didn't heed that warning.
Right.
I got better.
Did you see your kids talk to them?
Yes, dear. When I wrecked in February of 2015, I actually went and stayed with David and the boys, and David took care of me. I mean, I couldn't wash my hair. I couldn't do anything for myself. I was completely out of it for like 3 weeks. I don't remember anything that happened.
Because of injuries related to the accident, or just because of the fog of addiction, or both?
I guess it was a combination of both. All the drugs I had in my system when I wrecked, and then the lick that I took to the head during the wreck. It was just a combination of things. Wound up getting a DUI, other substance, because the cop at the scene couldn't really prove that I was what I was on.
He knew something.
But he knew something. And so I actually went and stayed with David and the boys and was there and tried for about a month or two to be a wife, to be a mama.
It had been so long. I don't know how one would step back into that.
And David let me, like nothing had ever happened. And
yeah, that's a story unto itself, isn't it? I mean, that's amazing.
Yes.
Did you just fall off the radar for 8 months? Like, did they know you didn't? So basically, he probably got a call because somebody linked you to him while you're in the hospital.
Somebody saw me on the side of the road that actually lived near us and saw me on the side of the road in Jackson County and called him and, told him that I had had a wreck and that that he needed to check on me.
Well, there's something so exemplary of the delusion of addiction here, right? So clearly your injuries were bad enough that you needed all this help. And yet, lying in a hospital bed, you're refusing to bleed. Lying in a hospital bed, I'm assuming, full of injuries, saying you guys are lying to me. Right? I mean, it's just crazy. And so here is another, well, you certainly picked the right men to support your addiction, right? Because he brings you, brings you into this, back into the home, gives you no flack. He's just kind of bygones be bygones. Let's move forward. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. And that lasts for you for about a month.
About a month.
Well, did any real when you just said that, it made me think, did any real conversations ever take place, or just?
Nope. No real conversations ever took place.
Just come on home, everyth's fine.
Everything's fine.
How did your children act to have you back home? You hadn't been there.
No, they wasn't having. And they told, I remember my oldest was like, "Why is she here?"
Yeah.
Well, they're probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming they're protective of Dad.
Absolutely. That he was there. I mean, he was the only stability that my children had in their life.
Yeah.
Was their dad. And,
He didn't trust you.
He didn't. No. And I would bounce in and out, like from 2015 on until.
When you left that time, you stayed for a month and you left.
And then from
Same kind of departure, on your way to the store, never come back?
Never come back. I would say, "Hey, I'm going to a friend's house. I'll see y'all in a couple of hours." And I mean, it would be a month, 2 months, and I would pop back in. I would need somewhere to go crash because I was tired of staying in a trap house.
Home?
And he would,
at that point,
he would welcome me every single time.
Wow.
Even with your children saying
even with
they
my
didn't
children,
want you there.
And they did not want me there. They did not. And I don't blame, I don't blame them. I don't blame them. I wasn't allowed at my mom and dad's house.
Did you talk to them when you would be there?
Nope. Wouldn't talk to them. Just, I stayed away. The guilt and shame, and not wanting my parents to see me, because at that time I weighed like 120 pounds. My face was sunken. I mean, I was a hot mess, to say the least. So in 2015, I leave again. And in December of 2015, I meet the man that I would live a double life with for the next 7 years. Like, I didn't have a husband and children at home.
Wow. He didn't know?
Yes, he knew.
Okay.
He knew that you had a husband and children. So the double life was for your husband and children. Yeah. They didn't know.
Yeah, they knew. Like, David knew.
Oh, everybody knew.
Everybody knew. And he would not. I took David divorce papers twice, and he told me, he said, "You're my wife, and I'll never divorce you."
Wow.
And he said, "I'm sick. I'm not going to live. You will outlive me." And I remember laughing, because I'm like, at the rate I'm going, buddy,
yeah.
in less than, it's going to be good if I make it through the next 24 hours, let alone any length of time after that.
That's still you not being able to really think of any consequences. And I don't think you cared.
I didn't care.
That point.
I didn't. And the more he let me get away with it, the more I done.
Yeah.
And it was like, you're not going to do anything. So what does it matter what I do?
What did he mean he was sick? I know
After
he'd had that heart attack.
and then 6 months later, he wound up having another one.
Oh.
So there was a heart disease.
Yes, he had congestive heart failure, high blood pressure, just numerous things. And
you said he got opiates. Now, is he on long-term use as well? Does
yes,
that ever stop
but
for him?
he never abused, he
Right,
would
took
take
him
his
as-
exactly like the doctor prescribed, and he was a as-needed person. And I, on the other hand, the addiction just would never let me be a as-needed person.
Did you ever borrow some of his?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
didn't borrow them,
No,
but
I know.
yeah,
You
I mean,
took them.
if that's what we want to call it, then
Yeah.
sure, that sounds much better.
Well, and I would imagine he gave them to you if you asked for them.
Absolutely, he would. Every time. Every single time he would give them to me.
It's interesting because I think about your children caught in that, right?
In
Angry
the
at
cross.
mom.
Yes.
Loving dad, protecting dad, but probably also really angry at dad. What in the world is wrong with you, right? I mean,
Why
they're
can't
trying
you
to
see what we're seeing?
parent him, yeah.
Yep.
So, okay. Wow. So,
You're in a relationship now. You meet this guy.
The love of my life.
Is it?
the love of your life.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, and it was so
Again.
toxic.
Yeah.
I went to
You
jail.
said, yeah, again. It's the love of your life again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Went to jail several times over that for domestic violence charges.
You to him or him to you?
Both.
Both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah.
But me being who I am, of course, when the cops would show up, I'm like, what are y'all going to do? And they're like,
We'll show you.
we're going to turn around. And I was like, oh, okay.
How many times? I mean, had you been in and out of jail yet?
No.
Oh.
Had not,
okay.
had never, had through all of that, had never caught any charges, never been to jail. And the first time I get arrested, I'm like, And
you
I
call
go to
your
Mobile
dad?
County Metro Jail, and I'm like, I don't think I like it here.
Yeah, it's miserable.
But,
It is
but you
miserable.
did not like it enough to change your life yet.
Right.
Yeah.
I got back out, went right back to him.
Who got
and
you out?
My dad.
What's your mom's role in all this? Is your mom angry at your dad for all of this? Is
Absolutely. And she did not, I mean, she told me one time, she was like, I just don't understand how you can be addicted to something like that. And I said, well, be thankful that you don't. I said, but you need to read why 3 out of your 5 children are addicts. Sorry, Mom, when you listen to this, you're going to kill me.
Are you more like your mom? Is your mom other than the addiction? Is your mom a fighter?
Yes, she is,
Yeah.
very much so. Very sassy.
Yeah.
Probably
Very
gonna roll her
sassy.
eyes when she sees it.
Okay.
Yes, she is. She's going to be like, I'm going to kill you.
She's right. I am gonna kill her.
Yeah. So so you
so-
come by it honest.
Yes, I do.
So this 7-year relationship, toxic, abusive, in and out of jail for domestic violence. David and the boys are living their lives without you.
I would show up to baseball games, football games, but I would be high, embarrass my children. It was terrible. It was.
But you were gonna. It didn't matter at that point if they told you and they genuinely meant it. They didn't want you there. Even they were not going to tell you what to do.
Right. I was coming
You're my
anyway.
kids.
Yeah, you're
And
my
I'll be
kids.
there.
And
Yeah.
nobody's going to tell me that I can't come around my children.
And David wasn't going to back
Even
on
my
it.
children.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, my children. You know?
Was there were you buying the lie that as long as I show up at the games, I'm not a horrible mom?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm
Exactly.
still here.
As long as I'm there and take a picture for Facebook and post it, then I'm not the sorry mother who walked out on her children. In my crazy addict mind, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And that's so far from
How
the
does
truth.
it feel like talking about? Because I know we have to have, I think, a sense of humor looking in the rearview mirror when we're in a better spot. But I can only imagine that there is a side of you that's not laughing at all when you talk about this.
No.
Yeah. And especially since you're still fighting for those relationships to be bettered, right? Yeah. So it must be heartbreaking, is what I'm assuming. I mean, as you think about that in real time.
It's very heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I love my children, and I love them even when I was at my worst.
Yeah.
And now I look at them, and I can't imagine my life without them. But at the time, I wasn't willing to give up what I was doing for them. They wasn't as important as me getting high. And that's sad to say, but it's true.
But I'm so glad, I know this sounds awful, but I'm very glad to see this side of you. And just to kind of explain, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you tell this story with a lot of laughter and smiles because the laughter and smiles is a defense to this, mm-hmm. right? It's easier to paste that smile on my face than feel the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So as a parent, right, I appreciate the honesty of seeing that piece of it, and that speaks truth, right? I think some people misunderstand the smiles and the laughter, and it almost feels offensive to somebody out there listening, going, "How can she tell this?" But the reality is, it's a mask over that pain, right?
I definitely have to. The smile, but it's far from a joking matter.
Correct.
It was literally a matter of life and death for me to get my life together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was going nowhere fast.
Yeah. And things in your story are about to get more painful. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. What happens?
So I'm from 15 on, I'm in and out of the kid's life, in and out of David's life. I'm living a whole nother life with someone else. And in July the 11th of 2019. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
The father of my children took his last breath in front of me on the face of this earth. And as I watched him laying in the bedroom floor, I knew that my life, as I had known it, was over. That was July the 11th. I up and moved back in with my children. They are now 18, 17, and 12, and their daddy just died. And
was it his heart?
Yes, he had a massive heart. Well, actually had a blood clot. And
why were you there at the time? I'm just curious. Did he know he was not doing well?
I had went by there for he had given me. Okay, so that was a crazy week, that week leading up to David's death, looking back on it now. So that Monday, I get pulled over, don't realize I have a warrant for my arrest from the guy that I was living the double life with. I go to jail in Saraland. Saraland transports me to Mobile County Metro Jail. I get out. They let me bond myself back out. Actually, David come and got me that time. Well, that Wednesday, he gives me his vehicle, which was a car that he had actually bought for me while we were married. But when I left, of course, I didn't take it. And I'm like, why are you giving me the car? And he was like, because you're going to need it. And I'm like, well, you need it because you have the boys. And he was like, well, I have my work truck. It's fine. Zach's got his truck, which is our oldest. And he said, it'll be fine. So I had to go by there. It was on a Thursday, I believe, that he passed. And we were standing there talking, and he said, will you run me up to the bank real quick? And I was like, sure. We come back from the bank, we're talking, and he looked at me and he was like, I don't feel like something doesn't feel right. And I said, he had a pacemaker defibrillator because of the heart problems. And I said, well, is your defibrillator going off? And he was like, no, something just doesn't feel right. I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and call the ambulance, get them to come. That way, if something's going on, they can just go ahead and transport you to get you checked out. And he knelt at the foot of the bed, and he turned and looked at me and called my name, and he smiled, and he was gone.
Oh my goodness.
He was, and I just remember, I just remember going, God, why? Why not me? I'm the drug addict. I'm not the mother I should be. Shirley wasn't the wife I should be. And he was all the things, but you took him and you left me here. Why? Like, I had all these questions, and then I was mad at God because he took David. And I really turned my addiction up then. Like,
even though you were living,
even though I was there with my kids.
How did they react to you moving back in?
They hated it. They hated it.
And you?
Yeah, they hated me. Yeah, they didn't want me there.
Yeah.
And
you're ramping up your addiction to boot.
Yes. And so my 18 and 17-year-old Zach and Luke were pretty much free to do whatever they wanted to do whenever they got ready to do it. And of course, there wasn't a parent there to stop them, to tell them not to. And my youngest, Caden, was 12 at the time, turned 13 that September. Moved in with my parents. He called my mom. I come home one day, I'd been gone, and he was there with his older brothers, and he had called my mom to come get him, and he moved in with my mom and dad, and that's where he resides today.
Wow. And how old is he now?
He is 18.
Okay.
Getting ready to graduate high school in May.
I'm just thinking about the chaos that your addiction is causing here and with the kids. Is your dad's enabling still undeterred, or at this point is he switching to protect the kids?
He's done at this point.
So
he's
to
done.
protect the kids.
Kind of when that wreck happened in 2015, and then I got into that relationship with the guy that I was living the double life with. Okay. My dad pretty much washed his hands. I mean, he loved me.
Sure.
He couldn't really deny it anymore.
He was done helping. I mean, he was, and he meant it.
Yeah.
When my dad had enough of something, he had enough of something.
Yeah. It just took him a while to get there.
It just took him a while to get there.
Yeah.
So you're living there? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm just, your son's moved in with your parents.
Mm-hmm.
Are you having any relationship with your parents? Like talking to them, or is it all surface? Because y'all are not going to talk about the elephant in the room, because no one's going to talk about that.
It was just mostly what we talked about is what my plans were going to be now that David was gone. What was I going to do? And I didn't know. And
did they know about the double life, the other guy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask a quick question about that. Sorry, we keep cutting you off, but
Yeah.
You move back in with your kids who are hating the whole situation. Is this other man still in your life? Like, do you bring? I know he's not living there, but does he come over?
Because my children could not stand him. Okay. My family.
So there was a line there.
There was a line there.
Does that end your relationship with him, or is it just on the side?
It's just on the side at this point.
Okay.
And then that happened in July of 2019. Didn't really speak to him again until January of 2020. I went to my mom and dad's house, had not been there. And
when you said didn't speak to him, you're talking about your son who moved in with your parents?
My ex.
Oh, your ex, okay.
Yeah. So in January the 15th of 2020, I went to my mom and dad's house. And when I opened the door, my mom just gave me this look like, what now? And I asked my dad to walk outside, and I looked at him and I said, you've got 24 hours to help me get some help or I'm going to die. Because that's where I was at. I had reached the end of my rope.
What did it take, though? Like, at what point do you understand, like, what, after everything that it has already cost you that you couldn't even bring yourself to acknowledge, what made you get to this point where you said, okay, enough's enough, I'm going to my dad, help me this one last time? Like, what was that?
So, like, 3 weeks before I went to my dad and told him that I needed help, I, at this point, had not touched crystal meth since 2015. Now, the pills were still there more so. I mean, I was, at this time, was probably up to 30, 35 Lord Tab 10s a day at this point.
Yeah.
And so I wake up. I have a dream, and I wake up, and I could smell crystal meth. I could taste it. And pretty sure it was the enemy saying, if you do it again, I'll have you for the rest of your life.
That's what it felt like internally.
And that's what it felt like. And I woke up in a cold sweat. I sat straight up in my bed, and I knew right then and there that I had to get myself together, or my children were going to be orphans.
Wow, what a powerful, I mean, that's a spiritual dream, right? I mean,
It was very real to me.
Yeah.
It was very, very real to me.
Yeah. So
I get that.
I'm assuming your dad welcomes that request. I mean,
Yes, he cried like a baby.
and so where do you end up?
At the Home of Grace in 8 Mile, Alabama.
What day did you get there?
January the 16th of 2020. And on January the 17th, in that little chapel on that porch, I got on my knees and I surrendered, and I surrendered it all.
Amen.
And I told God in that little chapel, I talked to him just like I'm sitting here talking to you guys, and I said, if you don't deliver me and set me free from this, I'll leave here, and I'll never, ever be any different than what I was when I hit Hallelujah Lane. And when I threw my hands in the air, I could literally feel the shackles falling off of me. And I knew that I had been truly delivered and set free.
Before we go any further, let's take a minute to address the man or the woman listening to today's episode and wishing for a better life. Or maybe addiction has completely overtaken a family member or a friend.
You are not alone. As you may know, the Jesus Loves Addicts podcast is produced by the Home of Grace, a Christ-centered addiction recovery program in South Mississippi with over 60 years of experience.
The Home of Grace has residential programs ranging from 30 days to 12 months. With 2 separate campuses for men and women, they are fully staffed with caring individuals who want nothing more than to guide you to a life of recovery.
Services include individual and group counseling, marriage and family counseling, classes, workshops, GED, and workforce training, all grounded in biblical principles.
And because of donations from the community, the cost of the program is incredibly affordable.
Thousands of alumni from across the country can tell you there is no other program in the world quite like the Home of Grace.
If you want to start a new path to recovery, don't wait. Speak with an admission specialist today. Visit homeofgrace.org or call 833-55-GRACE to talk with someone.
That's 833-55-GRACE. Call the Home of Grace today.
Up until now, and then one other time, there was really no mention of God. You did mention being mad at God when your husband died. What was there a childhood introduction to God? Like, did you understand?
Yes, I mean, my grandmother took me. I went to church with my grandmother and my mom, and was pretty much raised in church up until I hit my teenage years.
Said, I'm not going.
I'm not going. Mm-hmm. And even at I remember even at my lowest, like, I never lost my faith in God. I knew it was Him that protected me every single second of every single day of this life that I was living, because by all accounts, I should be dead or in a prison cell somewhere.
Right.
So I knew that it was the power of my parents praying fervently for me and bending God's ear on my behalf for me to get better, whatever that took. And my mama told me, I prayed that for God to do whatever it took.
To break you.
Yeah, you had to be broken.
Yeah.
She knew that.
And even when I made it to the Home of Grace, I wasn't broken. Not yet.
Yeah.
I still...
So God was always an understanding you had, but you were just responding to Him with the same rebel spirit as you were responding to everybody else in your life that wanted... Okay.
Right.
Okay, so that makes sense. So to have that conversation in that little chapel, as you said, made sense because you knew He was there, but now you were going to throw down an ultimatum in some ways, but much differently.
Yes.
From a broken place.
Yes, from a very broken place.
Yeah.
And it was life changing from that moment on, because even going into the home of grace, I never had relationship with females. Like, my friends were always guys. I had a few female friends, but I always thought that females were vindictive. They were going to talk about you behind your back.
Well, most of them had, and you had also heard women. I hear that.
So when I get to the home of grace and all these women are loving on me, and they're like, "We love you," and I'm like, "But you don't."
You don't know me.
What's the truth of it? There is one woman in that crowd that I'm assuming didn't.
There's a couple of them in that crowd, actually, at the home of grace.
Well, yeah, but I'm really referring
Miss Littleton?
No, I'm really referring to you.
Oh, to me?
Did you not love yourself? Is that why you couldn't accept it?
No, I did not love myself at all.
There was a hardness.
Yeah.
Yes. And going through David's death, like my heart was already cold and black, but it was really cold and really black at this point. When I make it to the home of grace, I'm just a shell of a human being at this point. I'm just existing. I'm not living life. I'm existing in a world that exists to a lot of people except for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So typically we shun love when we don't feel it for ourselves, right? Because it feels fake.
Right.
We don't know how to receive that.
But once
to say she was a tad snippy is an understatement.
Now, Kathryn. It was that authority thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was that authority thing. Like, I still didn't want to be told what to do. Still, I remember poor Miss Sandy, my counselor, bless her heart. She had I would go sit in her office for like the first 2 weeks, and I would just sit with like my arms folded and my legs crossed and wouldn't say anything. And she's like, "You can talk when you're ready." And I'd say, "But I'm not ready."
Yeah.
And she'd say, "Well, why are you here?" And I said, "Because I have a drug problem." And she was like, "Okay, well, when you want to talk about it." And this went on for a couple of weeks. And then finally, I was like, it's time to get rid of this mess. Like, I can put this persona on that I'm tough, I'm a strong woman, all these other things. But in the truth of the matter was, but I was broken, man. I was so broken on the inside. I had no idea what was that? I had no clue as to what love was, where it even come from. I mean, of course, I knew that God loved me and had, sent Jesus to die for me. But as far as people like you, Kathryn, loving on me at the home of grace like you did, and I didn't want you to love me. I didn't want anybody to love me because I didn't love myself.
Well, and you didn't think you deserved it.
Right. And I had thought that, David dying and the abusive relationships and all of that was what I deserved. That was my punishment for walking out on my children and not being the wife and mother that I should be. Mm-hmm. And now looking back 5 years, I never thought I'd make it 5 seconds, let alone 5 years saved, sober, and set free, and truly, truly delivered from a life of total destruction.
Yeah.
And in 5 years, and all glory goes to God, I've never had a craving. I don't want them. I don't need them. 2 years ago, I had 3 teeth cut out of my mouth. Never took a pain pill. I took ibuprofen.
And it worked, didn't it?
And it worked.
Yeah.
And it worked. I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
It really does.
And, so I get out of the home of grace. I'm living life. My oldest 2 kids, like Luke, my middle son, God love him and Zach both, every single Saturday at the home of grace. They were there, man. They were there.
Well, let me ask you this. What's happened to the rebel?
She died.
Did she? Because, it's interesting because, right? The Christian walk, I've heard this said, I love this saying, is that, he's either Lord of all or he's not Lord at all.
He's Lord of all.
Yeah, and that's a submissive
And he put
position.
her, he put that to sleep. He put that to rest. I don't.
Even people to people, like if you
Even
have,
people to people. Like I love people. And I.
Does that mean you also love you now?
Absolutely. I love myself. I do. And I realize.
And you forgive yourself.
And that's been a hard thing. That was not easily done, the forgiving myself, even after I come out of rehab, even forgiving myself for the guilt, shame, and regret of things that I had done, and I had to go back and
look at it
and say I'm sorry to a lot of people because I had,
even if they didn't forgive you,
even
you
if they didn't forgive
me.
me, I still had to say it. Like I went to my children, I'm sorry, I love you.
Y'all owe me nothing.
You owe me
but
nothing.
You're going to hear it.
And I remember, Kathryn, this sticks out so much, and I share this often in my testimony when I do get to share it. The night you gave your testimony to us right after I was on the program, and you said, let my words say nothing, but let my actions say everything. I live by that to this day. And I remember you standing up there and saying that. And I thought, that's what I want my life to be when I get out of here. So thank you for being open to us and loving me when I couldn't love myself.
Thank you for sharing that. And just.
I think for me watching, was a house mother when Paula came through, when you came through that program. And I said snippy, it was an understatement. It was just a hardness. But getting to watch that crack and break, I remember when your kids came to visit, just this joy, this excitement. There's healing, even though there's a lot of healing left to do. Giving up when it's hard is not an option.
No.
It's off the table. So when that's off the table, the only option is to keep going through it.
Yes.
No matter what it looks like.
Yep.
So it's an honor to know you and to get to watch you.
Yep. And God, I remember being in that dorm when I made it when I was working in the kitchen and made it to the back dorm, and I remember being in there, and for whatever reason, the shower was always my quiet time. I guess because there was so many women in one dorm, and it was always loud and rambunctious. And I remember I was praying for restoration with my children and with my parents, and I heard God speak to me and tell me that he was going to give me my children back, and it was going to be better than I could have ever imagined. And here I sit 5 years later with my children
living
back.
the promise.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, but you did say those are still works in progress.
My baby child, yes.
Yeah.
He still has some resentment there,
Sure.
and I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Like he wrote me a letter in the Home of Grace. I'll never forget it. I had to take it to Sandy because I had a whole breakdown that day, and he flat out, he was 13 years old, and he said, "Don't use my dad's death as an excuse for your behavior." And it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Wow.
And I knew then I had to change.
What wise, insight for that young man at that
13,
time, right? Yeah.
At 13.
Yeah.
And so when I come out of the Home of Grace, I sat him down and I told him, I said, I don't want my words to mean anything, but I want my actions to prove it all.
Yeah.
And I said, I promise to show you every single day that I'm left here on the face of this earth that I love you and that I'm sorry. I've told all of my boys that.
Yeah. You know, to piggyback off of those two words, I'm sorry, you said something that I know the intention of it, and I know it makes sense when we say things like, I felt like I wasn't deserving of fill in the next good thing. Mm-hmm. But what's the reality of it is, and I know this is hard for people to understand, right? Because we want to see it from human perspective, but the reality is we're not deserving of that.
Right.
And when we come to that reality, that what we deserve is what would make sense given our actions, whether you're an addict or not, right? Would not be pretty, right? What we deserve is what we often tell ourselves we deserve. But that's what's so amazing about the faith, the Christ relationship, right? Is because the mark of the Christian isn't moving from a place of undeserving to deserving. Right. It's moving from a place of ungrateful to grateful because we realize that we've received something we don't deserve. That's what mercy is. Right. That's what grace is,
yes.
Right? Does that... Am I saying anything you wouldn't agree with?
Oh, you're right. Yeah. I mean, that is 100% correct, you know, and, you know, when I like to call it blinders, when the blinders finally come off at the Home of Grace, and I really started, you know, Proverbs 31:25 is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of her future. And I'm walking in that now. Wow. I don't have to fear my future because I know that God holds it in the palm of his hand.
So you've moved, you know, you say that with such determination. It strikes me that you've moved from the illusion of a strong, tough girl to
I'm a softie.
No, but you're a strong girl now, right? Because of him.
You're confident in your identity.
Yes.
Because we are weak when we think we're strong, but when we recognize our weakness, you're strong. And I see that in you now. What a wonderful transformation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 2020 I get clean. Surrender my life at the Home of Grace in 8 Mile. I graduate in April. I go back to the ex that I was with for 7 years. Actually, he was, you can ask Kathryn, every Thursday, like clockwork, here he come to the Home of Grace. And my counselor told me, she said, this is not going to work. And I laughed and went on, and I graduated in April.
But he's the love of my life.
Yes.
I love him.
I love him. And September of 2020, I finally ended that for good.
Was he still using?
Mm-mm.
Did he never use?
He never used. He never used.
So your attraction to men was the codependence.
It was very codependent. I couldn't be by myself. I didn't want to be by myself.
Well, they're codependents too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so September of 2020, I actually move in with my nephew and his wife. This is how God works. I would have never been allowed in their home prior to this. And I got to see what healthy, true love in a relationship was. They really showed me that. And I lived with them for about 3 months.
Wow.
And then here comes this amazing man that would now be my husband that I married April the 22nd of last year. And he knows my past, and he knows, but he loves me.
Yeah.
And I know now that he genuinely loves me for who I am. And I'm able to love him back because I love myself.
Yeah. I think you just said it there. It's not that you didn't love David. It's not that you didn't love your children. If you don't love you, you have nothing to really give anyone.
Right.
And now you can love him and have a healthy marriage with God as the center.
Absolutely.
Because you love you.
Yeah, because I tried to live with him and not be married,
It didn't work out.
I was going to try that, and the conviction, man, I would lay in bed at night and I'd be like, what is this? What is going on? And then I was like, oh, this is conviction. So I actually wound up moving out, moved in with my middle son, and I told Lee, I said, we have to get married. And he's like, what? And I'm like, we can't live together. Like I
can no longer live like that.
I can no longer live like this. And so we, on April the 22nd of 2024.
Wow.
We got married, and God has blessed. I mean, he has done more for me than I could ever. If you would have told me 5 years ago that my life would be what it is today, I would have laughed and told you that you were out of your mind, that those things would, I mean, I'm walking in blessings that used to be prayers.
And that's neat. What a great way to put that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and there's the evidence, too, of the question I asked, right? I said, what happened to that rebel? And you said she's gone. And so there was a hiccup, right? You thought, hey, I'm going to handle this relationship my way. You move in, but then you submit yourself to that conviction, right? You didn't rise up against it.
Right.
You didn't say, I'm doing this my way.
You're obedient.
Yeah. You
I had to be, I mean, I knew that I had to be obedient, you know, and I wanted people to look at me and go, you know, even though she used to be X, Y, and Z, look at her now. Look what she's done. And, you know, even in my line of work that I do, you know, I come in contact with customers every single day, and I'm able to share my testimony from time to time with customers and things of that nature. And, you know, my boss, and Mr. Paul, when you listen to this, I love you. He's amazing. I mean, he looked at me the other day when I told him I was coming to do this podcast, and he said, I'm so proud to have you working for me.
Wow.
And I said, me?
Yeah.
And he said, absolutely. And I said, wow, well, thank you.
That's awesome. Paul, let me ask you to do something, if you don't mind. Oftentimes we'll ask our guests to speak to the listener out there about somebody struggling. But would you be able to say something specifically to the person who is finding their identity in that rebel and in that rebelliousness, that anger at the world? What would you tell them? And
that's good.
First and foremost, you have to fully submit your life to God. And it's kind of like having splinters. You have to let those splinters come to the surface, and you have to deal with them. The rebel, the struggling with authority, just wanting to do your own thing. You have to fully just get along with God and just tell him what you're struggling with, and allow him to remove those splinters out of you, and realize, number one, that you were made in his image and that you were fearfully and wonderfully made. No matter what the world may say, what God says surpasses every single bit of that. And it's okay not to be the rebel, the tough girl, I got to do things. It's okay to be soft. It's okay. It's much better over here, actually.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. Yeah. And thank you for being on and sharing your story. And really, I love that, the rebel piece of it. Yeah. Because there are people who find their identity in that, right? And at the core, we are rebellious in nature. It is the backdrop to the gospel story he came to, right? But what I'd like to maybe say to the listener today who is identifying with that, it's not that you are without authority, right? If you're angry at authority and you're rebellious, it's not that your life has no authority. It's that you've made your own bitterness and anger your authority. And sadly, that the thing about that is, while it may feel good in moments to lash out, that feel good is much like the temporary high of a drug or alcohol. But in the end, it's going to lead you to needing to lash out again and then again and then again. And
what happens is you are in bondage. You've created your own cage. And I don't say that wagging my finger at you. I say that with great compassion because, again, I understand the appeal of that, right? It feels strong in our worst moments. But the reality is, and what I hope you've heard in Paula's story, and I hope that what you see on her face is that when we submit ourselves to a different authority, remember, it's not that you are absent of authority. You're just listening to all the wrong voices. You are submitted to all the wrong voices. When we choose a different authority, Jesus, you will find your freedom there. It's the acknowledgement that we're broken, and it's the reaching out for something that can heal that brokenness, right? But first we have to see it. First we have to acknowledge it. And if you're struggling, I just want to say to you, if you're struggling and what you find is that week to week, month to month, year to year, what's happening is that you're not finding peace, but rather you're finding more anger and more resentment. Consider that you're submitting to the wrong authority. Consider that truth. Just consider it. And as the Bible tells us, taste and see. Take a chance. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Might this be a ticket out? I would challenge you to investigate it, and I would certainly suggest to you that it is. And I would certainly suggest to you that Paula's story is evidence of that. Praying for you guys. I love you guys. He came for the rebel. He came for the rebel. In some ways, we could say he was the real rebel, but in a much, much different way, because he rebelled against the norm. The worldly norm is bondage.
It is.
And he rebelled against that and showed us the pathway out. So, guys, we love you. I pray for you, for those of you struggling with that. And hey, please come on to, drop by whatever you're listening to this podcast on. Drop a comment in there. Say hello. Tell us your story. JesusLovesAddicts.com. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, God bless.